and you're listening to The Brown Perspective. I'm Eduardo, and I'm here with El Mero Mero R.O.
Hey, what is happening? How are you doing today?
Hanging in there, man. It's been a tough couple of weeks. First Buffalo, then Uvalde.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you want to go in that direction, it's been a tough few decades with all these shootings. Not a year goes
And
by where we don't get one of these mass shootings. It's very
yes,
unfortunate.
and Sandy Hook was hard because I think Sandy Hook was difficult because of the age of the kids. Well, again, elementary school students. Columbine, of course, was
Yep.
difficult, but it's high school, so in some ways there's a sense that there's more than you can do, but with
But
Uvalde, I think it just hits you with a balde de agua fría.
yeah, but also given how frequent they are, and you can go back to some of the other shootings like Columbine and even Sandy Hook, where people probably felt like, "Oh my God, this is terrible," but they probably weren't expecting it to happen again. Whereas now, I think Americans are not only taking in the news of this latest shooting, but also coming to terms with the fact that these are just going to keep happening because there's really no short-term solution in place to stop them. So I think we've entered a new phase of reckoning with this where it might be affecting people differently. Just coming to that realization that there's going to be another one next month or next year or sometime in the next year or two. Definitely in the next, 2 years, I'd say there's going to be another one. And I think that's probably going to hit people differently. I mean, I was commenting earlier that I wouldn't be surprised if some people start taking their kids out of school and opting for homeschooling or even requesting remote learning like we did with COVID.
Yes, but I think for me, when I first heard about it, and I think maybe because of the recent Buffalo shooting, since that was racially motivated, as soon as I heard there was in Uvalde, Texas,
Hmm.
and understanding that it was probably in a Latino community, my heart sank because I thought that perhaps it was another racially motivated shooting. And I know in this instance, we're still unclear what the motives were for the shooter, but he was also a, a Latino teenager, right? Someone who was dealing with issues and decided to perhaps become infamous by perpetrating this horrible act. So I think that it's just that mix of the shooting in Buffalo and also the shooting not too long ago in El Paso
Hmm.
that I think that immediately I thought, oh no, this is another racially motivated shooting. But even in the fact that it wasn't, it's still sad, right? Because it is brown on brown crime. So whether it's brown on brown, black on black, white on white, is young people, innocent people losing their lives when they don't have to.
Right, and just because it's not racially motivated, it also it it's unfortunate, but it also starts to make you realize that it's now becoming a uniquely American thing where at times race doesn't even matter anymore because I think before there was this quiet comfort in the Black and Latino community that at least our community didn't do this to ourselves.
Mhm.
That members of our community didn't go out and go on a shooting rampage. But now this is a Hispanic kid in a Hispanic school, uniquely an American phenomenon at this point. You don't really see this in Latin American countries, this type of senseless killing. So I do think that we're probably going to see more, not just from white America, but maybe more Hispanics and even African Americans doing this because something is going on with American culture that's creating this. Apart from the potential inspiration from that they draw from prior events or the copycat element.
Yes, I think copycat, and I know you mentioned how this shooting seems very similar to what happened in Sandy Hook in
Mm-hmm.
Connecticut, and that was hard. And I think the what's been harder, other than learning about the lives and the potential of the 19 kids that were taken away from us, and the two teachers who tried to protect them, was also the slow response by the police, or the details that are now coming to light, right? Because for the longest time, a lot of people who are pro gun always argued that what you need is have a good person, a cop, a law enforcement, somebody with a gun there to prevent the shootings. Well, the good guys with guns were there, but they stayed outside of the school for way too long, and allowed this massacre to happen.
And now
And
it's coming out that,
understandably so. I mean, they were afraid of a shooter with a semi-automatic weapon.
but now it's also coming out that they knew that he was in there with kids that were still alive in one of the classrooms. Because I think initially it was claimed that they thought that the shooter had barricaded himself. And so they had time to draw up a strategy to try to negotiate whatever it is that they were doing. But now it's pretty clear that some of the kids in the room were calling in saying that they were in there, that there were kids in the room with the shooter. So yeah, it's on top of people trying to make sense of why this kid would just randomly kill 19 kids and two teachers. Now people have to also try to put the pieces together into this puzzle as to why the cops didn't act in a way that most parents, I think, would have expected them to, which is to put their own personal safety at risk to try to save these kids.
Mm-hmm.
Or do you think that was protocol I mean, there's some protocol to establish what the situation is, but what does the protocol say when there's an active shooter and he's still in the classroom with kids? Do you try to open a line of negotiation, or do you just storm in and take him out before he can take out any more kids?
Well, I guess we'll find out, because I know apparently in December the police department had done an active shooter drill.
Yeah, I read
And
that.
so yeah, so I think that, so yes, I'm sure there's different scenarios, and maybe one scenario would be he wants to take these students hostages and ask for something, but I don't think that's, given all the other examples that we talked about. Usually these types of shootings is not about, it's not like a Hollywood movie, right? It's not about going in there and trying to ask for money or make demands. I think it's about killing the individuals that you're targeting for whatever reason, to to become notorious for that, to advance your message, or whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish with that
And
shooting.
yeah, and there were some parents that were breaking windows into some of the classrooms to try
Hmm.
to get the kids out. So it probably those kids would have been next if those adjacent rooms would not have emptied out, because I can just picture it where a whole bunch of kids and teachers ran into different rooms, and the unlucky ones where the shooter went in, those are the ones that were killed. But the other rooms, had they not emptied out, I'm sure he probably would have moved from one room to another. So the parents took the initiative. They were like, screw this, we're going to try to get our kids out and just break the windows and get them out however we can. Yeah, it's senseless. I think it speaks to how desensitized we are to some extent also, that we're not even trying to understand them. We're not even trying to think about what the motivation is of the shooter. It's almost like irrelevant at this point. It doesn't really matter.
Hmm.
I mean, we've been through this a million times with the previous shootings. It, there's no rationale for what they do, so we're not even going to waste time trying to understand what's going on with him, because I think we already have a good sense of what that template looks like. Loner kid, bullied, probably pissed off at the world, maybe radicalized through or picked on through social media, maybe radicalized a bit through 4chan or 8chan, and so yeah, it's just unfortunate that we've become so accustomed to this that we just move on from the motivation to now, talk about other aspects of it.
Yeah, I mean, because in part the motivation, while important, and is probably, and I think not to justify it, but I think the motivation and the circumstances that led to him acting that way are also the underlining root causes of the violence, right? So I know that it seems like some outlets are focusing on the family criminal record. I know I heard that the mother had a substance abuse issue. I don't haven't heard much about the father. I know he was living with his grandmother.
Yeah, but
And again, this is a broken
but
home.
that's not a new situation for kids. That's happened since.
The beginning of time.
Well, that's happened in the major cities here in the United States as far back as you can tell. You had gang infested neighborhoods where kids were growing up around drugs, and they never turned the gun on innocent kids. They may have shot, they may have gotten into fights and gunfights with other rival gang members, but it was never this senseless shooting, randomly killing indiscriminately, especially kids in schools. So that's not new. So there's something. Is it social media? Is that what's changed?
It's video games,
Nah, you think it's video
violent video
games?
games.
I don't know. It's possible that social media has taken bullying and that aspect of it to a whole different level that we can't even begin to understand because we're not going through that ourselves anymore. Just imagine all of the. I'm not trying to justify this, but I'm trying to understand what some of the pressures are on these kids, on top of growing up in a dysfunctional home with the parents might be doing drugs and low income. I don't know if it was a low income neighborhood or not, but usually that also leads to more problems. On top of that, you add the social media aspect of bullying, and then perhaps the copycat element and the glorifying of past events to try to claim some relevance for yourself. You can't find it any other way by socializing with your peers. So the easiest way that you see is, hey, let me just go kill a whole bunch of people, and I'll right away become relevant. And at the same time, I'll dish out some revenge, some again misguided anger towards everyone else. It's so easy to categorize. It's so easy to have this mentality of me against the world. And when you have that mentality, it's like the rest of the world is against you. So it doesn't really matter who you target. You're just going to target the other that are against you, and you're going to make them suffer by killing their kids or their grandparents or their parents. There's so much that that you can try to get into in terms of this, but I think definitely social media has played a big part now in amplifying some of the things that some of the pressures of growing up in this society.
Yes, I mean, you have social media, but then you also have the fact that he could, once he turned 18, he could get multiple high caliber weapons before he could even legally drink
Mm-hmm.
in the United States. I mean, he could cross the border down to Chihuahua and have a good time in Mexico because he was 18. But so he cannot legally drink, but then he can legally purchase a mini arsenal to go ahead and do that. Not only him, but a lot of other people who are perhaps dealing with that anger. And you're right. I think a person, young poor person, angry at their circumstances and and their lot in life is not nothing new. But unfortunately, it's sad that instead of using that to channel his energy to other pursuits, that he decided to instead take it out on innocent lives. Again, I don't we don't know if it was because someone there were kids from someone who picked on him, or maybe it was he had a really bad experience at the elementary school. Regardless, it's just hard to understand, and also horrifying to your point, because you realize how unsafe we are in general, because this happened in an elementary school. It could happen in a mall, happen in a shopping center, happen at a Walmart.
Yeah.
So basically, as you go on around living your life, this could happen to you or your loved ones.
And so when we look ahead towards potential solutions to this, there's the two sides to this where some advocate for tougher gun control, whereas others advocate for more self-reliance, teachers carrying guns, bulletproof backpacks. Have you heard about that?
Oh yeah, backpacks, blankets,
Yeah,
uh, doing like trapping, doing some sort of weird mechanism by the door that you can trap the shooter somehow.
yeah. No real solutions because any type of meaningful solution would probably take a long time because you have to reverse a lot of the processes that are already in place that are creating these shooters. So, and that takes years. But
It's
and
true, but
yeah,
but on that, I think that ironically, the same week of this incident is when the NRA had their annual meeting in Texas, and the fact that a lot of people showed up to show their displeasure at at the NRA and the political power and the politicians who stand behind them. And then there was also this clip of this little young kid at the gun show. I think it was in the Texas show, and then he is playing with a high caliber weapon. He must be like 3 or 4, and he already knows how to use it. He knows how to load it, cock it, and then shoot it. Obviously, it didn't have any things, but it was the type of image that you see. And again, I know that there's parts of the country, if you live in a rural community, if you go hunting, it makes sense for you to have weapons to an extent. But why do you need to have military grade weapons if you're trying to fight the U.S. government? You're already outgunned and outnumbered. So, like, why even try?
yeah. I mean, most people don't even. I mean, the type of people that make that argument that they want their guns to when they fight the government. The government's already winning. It's all the propaganda is already so effective. I mean, the same people that are um, trying to advocate for one policy here contradict themselves when it comes to like policies, foreign policy. So the propaganda is very effective. I think that the government wouldn't even need to fight the population with guns. They would just use some type of psychological operation to convince all the people. Have you ever heard of a problem reaction solution? It's like a problem is created. They wait for the reaction from the crowd, and then the government offers the solution. It's a tactic that you can use. But anyway, I don't want to go off on a tangent on that, but given that we're not going to find any meaningful changes to gun policy, at least not, I don't think. There's definitely outrage. I think the sentiment is changing. It might take a few more shootings. I know I don't want to sound callous, but that's probably what it's going to take. We are a very reactionary society. We react as opposed to take the initiative to do things. So I don't think meaningful gun reform is coming anytime soon, although eventually it will. But I'm not even sure if that's going to really. It's going to help some if you can't access these semi-automatics, but kids can always get guns, and if you're determined enough, you can always get guns illegally in the black market. And he was so close to Mexico. I'm sure he could have easily, like, if he had. I think the only way that I see that it could make some difference in this case with some of these kids is that these kids don't have a criminal past. I don't think they have any association to gang members. So it's not as easy for them to access the black market, right? They have to make a really concerted effort to try to find a contact or find somebody that's willing to sell them a gun and so forth. So it takes more. Some of these kids might just get discouraged. They might think, oh, I'm going to go shoot up a whole bunch of kids today. Oh crap, I need to get a gun. And then they start looking to see how they get a gun. When they go, by the time they realize how hard it's going to be to get it from the black market, they might just, like, you know, maybe change their mind or get distracted with something else. So I think it would help in that sense, but ultimately, if a person is motivated enough to do it, they'll have access to guns. Criminals will always have the guns.
Yeah, but I think the last point that I'll make is that yes, I mean he could have gone down to Mexico to get a weapon, but most of the weapons in Mexico come from the U.S. market,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's part of what's driving the the violence in Mexico and other parts of Latin America. You get these military grade
Mm-hmm.
American weapons that are easily bought in the United States. They get shipped, sold down south. They cause all sorts of mayhem, and again, it's all related, right? And then the violence that's caused by the drugs the Americans and Europeans want to have, but that they don't want to admit they're playing a role in all of this, right? So it's a vicious circle, a cycle that starts with the crazy weapons, the crazy demand for
It also think about the example and the message that our own foreign policy sends to all these kids here, because we are a pro-war nation. I mean, the same liberals that are calling for gun control are calling for us to arm Ukraine so they can fight the Russians. So no surprise then that the kids also grow up in that environment where they might pick up on some of that messaging as well. It's like our president's like, yeah, we're going to arm these guys and we're going to arm them to the teeth. And by the way, the NRA profits from that. So if you want to cut into the pockets of the NRA, just oppose all foreign interventions as well, not just here at home.
yes. I mean, war sells, sex sells. That's why all those vices
The other,
have been with us
and
for so long.
so we know that gun control is not going anywhere anytime soon. At least I don't think it will. I'd be surprised if it does.
Well, there's some, there may be some movement. There seems to be some serious consideration in the Senate. I know the House is considering some measures, but there seems to be some effort done by at least Senator Cornyn in Texas,
Hmm.
um, Senator Murphy from Connecticut, and some of the other senators who are concerned about this issue. So we'll see. They may or may not. Yes, I guess I wouldn't hold my breath. I mean, there's hope that they may be able to get something done, but whatever it
También
is that they get done is going to be a compromise that won't please either side and won't really address
also
the root causes.
you had Beto O'Rourke confronting the
Beto.
the police chief in that press conference also. So yeah, I think the sentiment is shifting. I think eventually it'll come. I can't tell you if it's actually going to make things a lot better or if we're just going to patch a problem and introduce a set of other issues. I actually I do think it's hard to really say. Um, I think the other approach of arming the police, arming the teachers, arming bulletproof vests. Yeah, that I don't think you can train every single teacher in this country to have a weapon, because then what's going to happen is the teachers are going to have guns in the classroom and then the kids are going to access them, and then you're going to start hearing about kids accidentally shooting themselves or shooting the teacher with the teacher's gun. So that's going to create a whole set of different problems. So the only thing that we could do that would be fast and it wouldn't be political, right? And they could probably roll out within a reasonable amount of time is have have police officers in the schools. That's my high school had police officers because it was in the inner city where they thought they needed police officers, but now you need police officers in just about every single school to protect from these random shooters.
Listen, President Trump, that's not the right solution.
Well, it's a
Didn't you?
solution that you could roll out faster. What's wrong with having police officers in the schools? It's better than a
Well,
kid wearing a bulletproof backpack, don't you think?
well, first of all, one there were police officers at Uvalde, and they didn't, that didn't work, right?
They had they
So
had school
maybe,
they had school officers.
well, I don't know if they had a school officer or not, but there were a group of police officers outside of the school who couldn't, who could have gone in and intervened.
But
And
were they? I'm talking about a school officers that have a relationship that are dedicated to the school, that their sole purpose is to defend it, so that they're acting in a way to even check people as they're coming in. I know it's super paranoid and it's not ideal, but the reality is these shootings are going to keep happening.
but the reality is that they're the police and young people of color have not had a good have not a good relationships, and that's why, as a result of the uprisings of the summer of 2020, there was a movement to try to take police officers out of the campus,
Yeah.
because oftentimes the police officers profile students,
Mm-hmm.
and then, and I mean, that was a big issue when we were in college too, whether or not the campus police should be armed or not. And
Yeah.
I know that when I was in DC, the police pulled a gun on me in the back of my own house. So I know that that is not that's not a good solution for the problem that we're discussing.
Yeah, well, it's not a perfect solution. Yeah, it would introduce those other type of problems. You could try to restrict the police presence to at least elementary schools, where police officers are less likely to find an elementary school Latino or black kid threatening to profile. It'll still happen, but getting racially profiled, getting roughed up by a police officer is different than 19 kids getting killed because they had no protection. So all you're doing really everything is a trade off. All you're doing is trading something for another, and that's what I'm saying. That at least in this case, the trade off seems to be that maybe some police officers, maybe some police presence in maybe even junior high, elementary, maybe training for them. I don't know. I don't even know if they would have the funding for that, to be honest, like for all the districts. But I just know that the other solutions are not, I don't think they're going to move. We're going to be sitting here in 2 years and there's going to be another shooting and we'll still be debating gun control or whether we should arm the teachers or whether, they should have like invisibility cloaks for the students. So just a practical solution would be the cops uh, taking with it all of the drawbacks of having them. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's a solution for sure, but it's a type of solution that shouldn't be, that I feel doesn't address the root causes,
Yeah,
and
but you're
it's
not.
just kind of can create, because then you grow up in a sense of this place of not feeling safe, or feeling that there's just this weird dynamic
But I think we're
when,
already there in a place where people don't feel safe. Parents don't feel safe with their kids in the schools, right? So you already create that atmosphere of anxiety, and also, I think at least from how I see it, I think I've already convinced myself, and it's well established to me that addressing the root cause is not going to happen because addressing the root cause takes decades of policy and setting us in a different direction, which is not going to happen. We're not. societies are really hard at addressing root causes. We just find ways to patch them. So that's what we do. We patch things, and right now all we're looking at here is how do we patch this situation without introducing too many other problems. Bueno,
I mean, yes, let's leave it there.
all right. If you all enjoy our content, make sure to check us out. We are Brown Perspective. Nos vemos.
Ciao.